What's up everyone, Scott the TroutHammer here, back with another top 5 video for you guys, and we're still doing something a little bit different this time around. So like I said in my last top 5 video, if you guys haven't seen that one, I'll put a link for it up here. I talked about how it's been about 3, almost 4 years since I've done a top 5 video, and where I usually do them on lures, techniques, stuff like that. This time around, I actually left it up to the community to help me decide, and it was Hunter Likesman that actually had the best idea of top 5 fish species to target in Oregon, and I like the idea so much I decided to do 2 parts to it. So part 1, that video is already on the channel. This is going to be part 2, and what I said I'd do for part 2 is top 5 species here in Oregon not to sleep on. These are the ones that you probably wouldn't think to target here in Oregon, but they're still really fun and really rewarding to fish for. I also got a whole playlist of top 5 videos that I've done over the years. Check those out for me. And if you guys are new to the channel, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button down there and the notify bell next to it, and click all notifications so you'll be the first to see all the great content that's going to come from this channel.
Yep, you saw me. There you go, guys. That's a fish. There you go, guys. That's unreal! Oh, this is such an awesome looking fish. Oh, yeah! Alright, guys, check that out.
So like I said in the last video, there's 3 main criteria I'm sticking to for how I wanted to rate these 5 fish species that you really shouldn't sleep on here in Oregon. And those 3 criteria are, 1, what makes it unique to Oregon? And a lot of these really, honestly, aren't going to be very unique to Oregon. But like I said with the title of this video, you shouldn't really sleep on these species. A lot of people don't think you can fish for these species here in Oregon, but you can, and holy crap are they rewarding. So kind of piggybacking off that comment, one of the other criteria that I'm rating these fish on is the reward for them. Are they a good eating fish? Is it an amazing fishing experience? But then also I'm rating them on how available they are, and I'm talking about like year-round location, how hard is it to find these fish and how hard is it to fish for them. So my number 5 species here in Oregon that you shouldn't sleep on is walleye. Guys, do not sleep on walleye. Easily one of the best eating fish you can find. I mean, ask people from the upper Midwest. They practically survive on these things. So you're probably going to say, well, Scott, don't I fish for these things in places like the lower Willamette and the Columbia River, and isn't that bad water? Well, here's the thing. They're a migratory species. The only things you don't want to eat are the ones that tend to sit in an area, whether that be like bottom feeding fish, except for sturgeon, they're migratory. But I'm talking about like suckerfish, carp, catfish. They sit in an area and they just collect all the toxins in the water. Walleye don't do that. They're migratory. They only go into those areas to spawn, which still doesn't affect the population or the quality of the meat. But I'm kind of breaking the seal on something here. Walleye is one of the best kept secrets in Oregon. I know plenty of fishermen who guide for walleye on the Columbia. That a lot of chatter among them saying that there is a world record walleye hiding somewhere in the lower Columbia. It is the perfect environment for them in terms of depth, water quality, and also population, what they have to feed off of. I mean, there's already monster walleye getting pulled out of the river every single year, but people keep saying there's going to be a world record pulled out of there any day now. So yeah, they prefer the deeper water, so a lot of places you're going to target this species are places that have deeper water, whether that's real deep rivers or real deep reservoirs. If people tell you there's walleye in your local pond, I wouldn't believe it. But one of the reasons why they're a really rewarding fish species to target in terms of like eating fish is because you can get a lot of meat off of one walleye, and you can keep a fair amount of walleye. You can feed a lot of people off your catch for the day. Just throw back the really big ones because, it helps. My number 4 fish species not to sleep on here in Oregon, Pike Minnow. Okay. Hear me out. Every time you catch a pike minnow, you help the other species here in the state, especially the particular ones that you want to have a real healthy population in, the ones you want to protect, i.e. the salmon and the steelhead. There's plenty of herons waiting around the banks of just about any river here in the state, just waiting for you to throw pike minnow their way. So what are pike minnow? Pike minnow are a species that, they're naturalized. I know I've mistakenly said in previous videos that they're an invasive species, but they have been naturalized, but they are just absolute pigs. They ravage other fish species, and since they live in rivers, 2 of the fish species they ravage the most are salmon and steelhead, things we don't want to go away. So because of that, there's actually a bounty system on these fish established in parts of the state where you actually get paid a certain amount of money based on the number and size of pike minnow you catch. And I know people who have made what I make in like 3 years just fishing for these fish for like 4 months. That's how high the bounty is on them. And the pike minnow population is so high that the bounty keeps going up. The bounty program's not slowing down at all. And you'd be surprised where you could catch them. I've caught pike minnow in places that I'm like, wait, I know the state. How did it get here? There's no connection to the Willamette River. But life, finds a way. So obviously they're everywhere. Obviously they're easy to catch. I mean, they will bite anything. I mean, you could throw an empty hook out there and they'd probably bite it. Just the flash would attract them. The primary reward about fishing for pike minnows, it protects everything else that you love about fishing in the state. If this is the only fish species that, as far as I'm concerned, if you kill every single one that you catch, we're golden. But there's uses for these things. It's free crab bait, it's free catfish bait, it's free sturgeon bait, sturgeon burritos. They love these things. They make great fertilizer for your garden or flower bed. Now, I don't know the parameters around getting in on the bounty system. That's something you'll have to do some research for yourself if you're interested, but I mean, I talked about how much you make. It's highly rewarding. Okay, got that out of the way. On we go. My number 3 fish species that you shouldn't sleep on here in Oregon, really closely related to number 2. I actually had some trouble figuring out how I wanted to like divide the score on these two and which one would rank higher, but I decided to go with number 3 being largemouth bass. Primary reason being they're actually not as abundant here in Oregon as its cousin, the smallmouth, but the reward on these things, guys, we have trophy bass in Oregon. You don't always have to go to Texas to catch them. So like I said in my last video, it's a joke and a way I've described Oregon fishing for a long time now is this is a salmon steelhead state. People come to Oregon to fish for things like salmon and steelhead, and they leave Oregon to fish for things like bass. But guys, there are plenty of trophy bass here in the state, and I've seen them in the water. I've had one for sure on the line. The state record is something around like 12 pounds, but I'm sure there's bigger fish here in the state that just haven't been caught yet. Just about any lake or pond here in Oregon has largemouth bass in them, and I have caught them out of the rivers too. And I know you got your usual suspects of destinations to fish for them. You got places like Devil's Lake on the coast, you got Hag Lake up north, you got a couple of coastal lakes that you can fish for them, but guys, they're here and they can get pretty big. I mean, there's one place around here, Cheetah Lake, close to where I live. I've caught more than 100 bass out of there so far, and I think my average is somewhere around 3 pounds. My personal best of 7.5 pounds came out of Waverly, but guarantee there's bigger bass in both those places. Would you eat the largemouth bass? I mean, I guess if you like disgusting things. Honestly, largemouth bass is one of the main reasons why I couldn't tolerate the taste of fish until I was an adult. But guys, don't sleep on largemouth bass here in the state of Oregon. They are an abundant species. They're a fun species to catch. You can catch them on just about anything. There's you gotta use some more specific lures and techniques to fish for the real big ones, the real like trench hog, ditch pickle, absolute monster toads. Why do we have so many nicknames for bass? And around here, you catch the monster, could make you famous. So I kind of gave away a little of my number 2 species not to sleep on here in Oregon, and that's smallmouth bass. And one of the biggest reasons why I actually rated that one a little bit higher than largemouth bass is because, like I said, they're more abundant than largemouth. There's a lot more of them in the lakes, in the rivers, especially the rivers around here. Whether it's the John Day, whether it's the Deschutes, whether it's the Willamette, there's a lot of really big river systems to fish for these things, and some of them can get pretty big. But another reason why I actually put them up here a little bit higher is because, sort of in the same reason why I put pike minnow on this list, it actually helps getting these things out of the system because they can be pigs and they can ravage the species that we want to keep and protect just as bad as the pike minnow. If you are fishing an area and you're catching dozens of cookie cutter, like 10 to 12 inch smallmouth bass, take a couple out of the system. Do everyone else a favor. Do the system a favor. But smallmouth bass are popular enough and they're abundant enough here in Oregon that they almost made my list of top 5 species to target in Oregon. One of the species that makes Oregon, Oregon. They are a little bit more of a northern species, cold water species, and we just happen to luck out just enough on the location, on the geography, for them to be pretty abundant in our area. I've never tried it, but also I've heard they taste fine. Should you choose to eat one? I guess they make okay fish sticks. But I mean, their location and their preferred diet probably lends to a little bit better tasting meat than largemouth bass. And my number 1 fish species not to sleep on here in Oregon, it's a species people call trash fish. It's a species people try to kill off, but they're actually really beneficial to the system if you do your research and you actually know what fish do, especially this species. There are ones that sometimes you see people litter them on the bank. Shut up, Scott, and say the species name. It's carp. Guys, there's a reason these things are nicknamed mud tarpons. They are one of the hardest fighting freshwater fish you can find. Pound for pound, they're one of the strongest and most energetic fish species you can target because they're just all muscle and no quit. I mean, in terms of hardest fighting, strongest freshwater fish you can target here in Oregon, obviously number one is going to be sturgeon, but in my mind a close second is going to be carp. But the difference, carp are far more abundant. There's not a lake or pond in the state that doesn't have carp in it, or at least should have carp in it. You'd have a pretty hard time finding a lake, pond, or river here in Oregon that doesn't have carp in it, at least common carp. And when I say big, I mean big, monster fish. I've seen some of these things in my area get heads this wide. When they're swimming by, they're making wakes wider than me. These things are just capable of putting so much mass on their bodies, and all that just means a great fight on the other end of the line. I keep saying I want to get one of these things hooked on the other end of my ultralight rod because I want to see that thing just turn that rod into a pretzel. So why is this something you really shouldn't sleep on here in Oregon? Well, I actually live really close to a lake here in the Willamette Valley that I personally know two professional carp anglers from the UK. Yes, they have professional carp angling in the UK. It's one of their only game fish. They come from Europe to Oregon to fish this pond for trophy carp because they know they're there. And by trophy carp, I mean 40 plus pounders. I mean, this lake is just absolutely full of big carp. The smallest carp I've caught out of this lake is 14 pounds. My preferred method to fish for carp around here is boilies. I actually show some of that in the videos that I made. I know how to make the boilies. I haven't actually made a video on how to make boilies. I probably should, but there's plenty of videos out there where you can learn how to do that yourself. But, you know, they'll even bite just plain night crawler on the bottom on a Carolina rig. Really easy to fish for. Just make sure you've got a real sturdy rod when you're fishing, a real capable rod, and you ate your Wheaties that morning when you go fish for these things, because I'm going to say until I'm blue in the face, they're some of the best fighting fish. They put up one of the best fights you can catch. Obviously, the primary reward of targeting carp here in Oregon is the amazing fight they put up, but you can't actually eat these things. Now, I know they get called a trash fish, and they're a bony fish, and some people say, you know, they're kind of gamey, but I've seen videos of people having carp cooked for them by a chef from Eastern Asia, and they say it tastes just fine. Some of them say it even tastes amazing. I guess that just lends to the spices and the cooking technique they use. Guess you just gotta know what you're doing. But sort of like with pike minnow when I talked about earlier, free crab bait, free fertilizer. So that's what I consider to be the top 5 fish species here in Oregon that you shouldn't sleep on. Let me know in the comments below what you guys thought. Let me know what your 5 favorites are. Hit that like button for me, and if you guys are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button down there and the notify bell next to it, and click all notifications so you'll be the first to see all the great content that's going to come from this channel. Other than that, I'll just say thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, tips up, tight lines, and have fun fishing.